Hello there, darling. It's Evelyn. I've got a kettle on and 1,000 thoughts racing faster than steam from the spout. But let me start with the moment my story truly began. I was standing in the parking lot of Sunny Ridge Care Home, clutching a plastic tote of my belongings, watching my son's car disappear down the drive. The taillights blinked once like a shrug, and then he was gone. Just like that. No backward glance, no apology, no hug. He left me there on a Tuesday. I still remember the way the receptionist smiled at me, that tight, rehearsed kind of smile they save for women who've clearly been blindsided. "Don't worry, Mrs. Evelyn," she said, like I'd misplaced a coat. "Most families come visit every Sunday." But I knew my son, and I knew he wasn't coming back Sunday, or the Sunday after that. He had said it so cheerfully, too, like it was a favor. "Mom, this trip to Spain is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Clara's booked everything already. We'll be gone 3 weeks. The kids are so excited. I thought this place would be better than leaving you alone. Better than leaving me alone." I wanted to laugh, as if being tucked away like a forgotten sweater in a cedar closet was any less lonely. They'd packed me an overnight bag and dropped me off like I was a pet. "Just a short stay," Clara had said with that high, brittle voice of hers. "You'll have a room and meals and staff to help. And when we get back, we'll reassess." Reassess. That's the word that did it. Because let me tell you something, darling. When your own son starts speaking like a benefits coordinator, it's no longer about love. It's about logistics. So there I stood, 69 years old, sharp as ever, still able to do my taxes without a calculator, holding a plastic tub of folded cardigans and antihypertensives, and it hit me like a slap. They weren't coming back. Not really. I wasn't part of the family vacation. I was an errand to be handled, a suitcase to store. And here's the part I'm not proud of. I froze. I smiled. I nodded. I let them kiss my cheek and drive away. And I walked through the doors of that facility like a woman who agreed she no longer had a place in her own life. The walls smelled of lavender and bleach. The halls echoed with quiet TV reruns and the hush of wheels on tile. My room was small, pleasant, peach-colored, a twin bed, a window overlooking the back lot, and a roommate named Diane who didn't speak unless prompted. I sat on that bed with my coat still on and stared at the door. I listened to the silence, and something inside me cracked. Not loud, not dramatic, but sharp. A split. Not grief, exactly. Not rage, just a knowing. I had been erased. But what they didn't count on, what my sweet, sunburnt son sipping sangria on a beach in Marbella never considered, was that I wouldn't stay erased. Because while they were boarding a flight to Barcelona, I was already making a plan. And 3 weeks later, when they came back, sun-kissed and clueless, I wouldn't be waiting in that little peach room. Oh no, darling. I had found something better. And by the time they called the front desk to ask if Evelyn Grace was ready to be picked up, I was already gone. Well, hello again, dear. Now where were we? Ah, yes. The moment I realized they'd left me there like luggage with a label, return to sender. Let me take you back just a little, because you deserve to know how a woman like me ended up in that pastel cell with nothing but my slippers and a copy of Reader's Digest. It didn't happen all at once. That's the trick with family betrayal. It comes dressed in politeness, in sighs, in phrases like, "We just want what's best for you, Mom." After my husband Harold passed, I tried to stay light on my feet. I downsized. I learned how to text. I even joined Clara's book club, even though it wasn't a club and no one read a thing except wine labels. But little by little, my son started treating me like a coffee table, something useful, but in the way. "Could you watch the kids Tuesday?" turned into, "You're the only one not working, Mom." And that turned into Clara's tight smile when I'd stop by unannounced. "Next time, maybe a text first, Evelyn. The kids have so many activities, you know." They started calling less, stopping by less. My fridge was always full for them, my mailbox full of their bills. And then one day I overheard them. Not intentionally, just walking past the study during one of their marital strategy meetings, as I privately called them. "She's just taking up space, David," Clara whispered. "I mean, what if she falls? Are we just supposed to leave our vacation early because she got confused and turned the stove on?" Confused. David said nothing. That silence told me everything. And it was 2 weeks later that he arrived with a suitcase in the trunk and a brochure in his hand. Sunny Ridge. "A beautiful short-term assisted living facility, Mom," he said, eyes darting like a guilty schoolboy. "Just while we're abroad, and you'll have support if you need anything, meals, medical, and no worries about the house." Ah, yes, the house, my house, the one with the lilac bush Harold planted before our 25th, the one with the squeaky gate and the handprint still pressed into the sidewalk out back. "We'll keep an eye on it," he offered. And I, fool that I was, let them drive me away from it. But on that first night at Sunny Ridge, I sat by the window with a plastic tray of meatloaf and peas, and something sparked. I wasn't senile. I wasn't frail. I wasn't a vase to be set aside so no one knocked me over during the party. I was Evelyn Grace. I had been a bookkeeper for 37 years. I had buried a husband. I had raised a son. I had balanced checkbooks down to the penny while my daughter-in-law thought Venmo was a budgeting strategy. I wasn't going to be left in this place like a receipt they hoped would blow away. So I did what I do best. I observed. I asked questions, quietly, kindly. I made friends with the night nurse, a wonderful man named Oscar, who loved ginger candies and shared stories about his grandmother. And when I asked him one evening, "Oscar, darling, how does one check themselves out of this place?" he blinked. "Well, no one really does that, Mrs. Grace. Usually family. But if someone were hypothetically still capable of making decisions..." He looked at me, really looked, and gave me a slow smile. "You'd have to sign a release, provide proof of residence, arrange your own transport." And that's when the real plan began. I waited until Sunday, the day most families came. The day the receptionist was swamped with fresh arrivals and the scent of lemon disinfectant filled the lobby. I put on my best blouse, did my hair, tucked my release papers into my handbag, signed and notarized. Oscar had a friend. Then I called a cab, but not to my old house. Oh no, I had one last ace left in my deck. Something I hadn't told my son. Something Harold and I had planned long ago, back when we still thought we had forever. A small cottage, paid off, tucked behind a church in a quiet town 3 hours away. Harold called it the someday house. Well, darling, someday had finally arrived. And while David and Clara were sipping wine in Seville, probably toasting to my comfortable care, I was unlocking the door to my new life. The air smelled like pine and memory. The curtains were dusty, the floorboards creaked, but it was mine. Every inch of it. I dropped my bag on the floor, opened every window, and let the truth blow through like a storm. I hadn't been abandoned. I'd been freed. And now I just had to decide. What would I do with my second act? "Ah, you're back. I'm glad. Now settle in, love." This next part still makes my hands tremble a little when I tell it. It was the morning after I'd moved into the cottage. I woke to birdsong, no alarms, no intercom calls for breakfast, just light, just silence, and me in my own bed. I made tea the old-fashioned way, kettle on the stove, not a button on a machine, and drank it on the porch Harold built with his own 2 hands. My feet still knew where the boards creaked, and my heart knew I'd come home. But don't think for one second that it was easy, that I didn't sit there, cup in hand, feeling equal parts relief and grief. Because starting over at 70 isn't like starting over at 20. You don't get applause. You don't get help moving boxes or a ribbon to cut on the porch. You get quiet, you get doubt, and you get memories. But I was not going to be the woman who sat and waited for a phone call that never came. I had done that for too many years already. So I started doing what I knew best, making lists. A to-do list, sure, groceries, post office, new sheets, but also a deeper one. I titled it in my notebook, What I Still Want, and I surprised myself. Paint again. Make real friends. Learn to cook something other than casseroles. Swim in a lake. Be seen, really seen. And at the very bottom, in smaller letters, forgive myself for letting them treat me that way for so long. I folded the list and tucked it in my wallet like a map, because it was, in a way. The next days were slow, sweet, and small. I bought peaches from a roadside stand and a chipped vase from a thrift store. I joined the Wednesday art group at the community hall, where I painted a crooked barn that made old Mr. Dugan weep because it reminded him of his childhood farm. I even went dancing. Well, sort of. There was a summer festival in the square, and a woman named Leanne from the quilting group pulled me onto the grass when a local band started playing Blue Moon. We laughed like teenagers, though we both had bunions and bad hips, and I didn't think of David once that night. But life has a funny way of circling back just when you stop looking over your shoulder. About 2 weeks in, I got a call from Sunny Ridge. The receptionist startled. Mrs. Grace, we were just wondering if you'd been picked up. Your son hasn't returned any messages. I told her calmly, kindly, that I had checked myself out, that I was fine, and that no further inquiries were needed. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed again. David. The name looked foreign now, as if it belonged to someone I once knew long ago. I let it ring twice before answering. Mom? His voice was careful, like he was talking to a stray dog that might bite. Hello, David. We came by to pick you up, and they said, you weren't there. That's right. Pause. Well, where are you? I sipped my tea. Somewhere quiet, somewhere I'm wanted. There was a long silence. Then, why didn't you tell us? And oh, darling, the way those words sat in my ears like stones. You mean before you dropped me off like luggage? I said, still calm. Before you left for Spain and asked the front desk to call if I got confused? He sighed, not guilty, annoyed. You're being dramatic. And that, my dear, was the moment I felt the last thread snap. No, David, I was being erased, and I decided I'm not going to be. Then I hung up. I didn't cry. I just walked out onto the porch, barefoot, and stood in the sun. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. But of course, nothing stays quiet forever. Not when you're a mother with something your grown child suddenly realizes he wants. And 2 days later, there was a knock on the door. David, sunburnt, flustered, standing on my porch like the prodigal son who never actually apologized. He had no idea what was waiting for him on the other side of that door. But I did. Come in close now, sweetheart. This next part, it's where everything started to unravel for him and tighten beautifully for me. David stood on my porch like a man who'd suddenly realized the ATM had legs and wandered off. He had that look on his face. Do you know the one? The look of a boy who touched something hot and can't decide whether to cry or pretend it didn't hurt. He wore a linen shirt, unbuttoned too far for my taste, and sunglasses pushed up on his head like he was still on holiday. I noticed the tan lines around his eyes. So many little details come to you when you're finally watching with both eyes open. Mom, he said as I opened the screen door but didn't step aside. Why didn't you tell us where you were going? I gave him the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Because you didn't ask. He blinked, shifted his weight. You scared Clara, the kids too. You just vanished. That made me laugh. I couldn't help it. A soft, startled sound, like a secret escaping. Scared them? I said. David, darling, they left me in a memory ward with strangers and a laminated meal plan. If anyone should be scared, it's me. He opened his mouth to argue, but then something shifted. Something flickered in his eyes. Maybe a memory. Maybe the echo of his own voice saying, "She'll be fine. It's just 3 weeks." I thought it was the best option, he mumbled. No, David, you thought it was the most convenient option. He stood there, silent, and I could see the wheels turning. He had come expecting tears, guilt, maybe a begging mother with bags packed at the door, but instead, he found me in a sunlit cottage with a pitcher of lemon water on the table and a half-finished painting on the easel by the window. "I came to take you home," he said finally. "I am home." "But we've been worried." "No, you've been embarrassed." He flinched like I'd slapped him. But I wasn't being cruel. I was being clear. There's a difference. You left me there, David, without a key, without a say. And now you're here because you don't like how it looks, not because you miss me. That's when his face changed. Something cracked open. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was confusion, fear, the dawning understanding that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't his to manage anymore. He tried again. "I don't understand. You've always said family comes first." "And it does," I said. "But it turns out I'm part of the family too." He dropped his arms in frustration. "You're overreacting. We never meant to abandon you." I tilted my head. "But you did." I let the words land like stones in water. Let them ripple. He looked away. "So what now? You just cut us off? Is that what this is? Punishment?" That made me sad. Not angry. Sad. Because he still didn't get it. "No, David. I'm not punishing you. I'm remembering myself. There's a difference." We stood there for a long, loaded moment. The breeze picked up. The wind chimes Harold had hung years ago tinkled behind me, soft and certain. Then I stepped back and gently closed the screen door. "You're welcome to call before you come next time," I said, "like you asked me to do." And then I turned and walked back inside. He didn't knock again. I watched from the window as he stood there, his hands on his hips, staring at the little house that didn't include him. Then he walked back to his car. But before he opened the door, he turned and looked up at the window, at me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't look away. "Ah, I've been waiting for you, darling." Because this next part, this is where the truth finally landed. Not softly, not gently, but with the weight it had earned. It was 5 days after David showed up and left without a word. 5 quiet, glorious days. I filled them with painting, walking the trail near the water, and helping Irene from down the road put up new shelves in her kitchen. Well, she supervised and I held the drill, but it counts. And then came Thursday. I was in the garden clipping back my roses when I heard the sound of tires crunching up the gravel, a slow, deliberate rhythm, not the hurried, nervous way David had arrived the first time. This time, they all came. David, Clara, and the kids, my 2 grandchildren, sitting in the back seat, both looking down at phones they didn't lift once. Clara stepped out first, looking like she'd swallowed vinegar. Even in flats and a cardigan, she wore disappointment like perfume. David followed, a step behind, with that tired, embarrassed son face I knew so well, the one he wore as a boy when the teacher called home. "Mom," he said carefully, "can we talk?" I stood, wiping my hands on my apron. Talking implies listening. Clara crossed her arms. "We think you're making a mistake." Oh, that word again. We, as if she and my son had merged into one spokesperson. "I didn't realize I'd applied for permission," I replied. David took a breath. "We just want to understand. You cut yourself off from us. You won't answer our calls. You left with no warning." "No warning?" My voice cracked sharp then. Not loud, just sharp. "You dropped me at a facility like I was a potted plant," I said. "And not once did you ask how I felt about it. You didn't call. You didn't check in. You made a decision about my life without including me in it." The children stirred in the back seat but didn't look up. "I was trying to do what's best," David said, softer now. "You were alone. You seemed off. Sad." "Off?" I repeated. "I was grieving, David. I lost your father. I lost my home to your debts. I lost us. But you didn't ask. You just assumed I was broken because I was quiet." Clara stepped forward. "This place, this situation, isn't safe. What if something happens to you out here? What if you fall? What if you forget your medication? My prescriptions are labeled. My neighbors know my schedule. And if I fall, I'll do what women like me have always done. I'll get up. Clara's eyes narrowed. This isn't like you. No, I said. It's like me finally remembering who I am. David looked down at the dirt. So what, you're just done with us? That made something in me ache. Not anger. Ache. No, I said quietly. But I'm done being something you put in storage when life gets full. I'm not a spare bedroom, David. I'm your mother. And you've forgotten how to treat me like one. He stepped toward me then, and I saw the old David. The boy who used to fall asleep in my lap with jam on his cheeks and dinosaur pajamas on his legs. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know, I said, but you did. He nodded, looked back at the car. Clara was already climbing in. She had no interest in reconciliation, only image. She had done her duty, shown up, spoken her piece. She could now tell herself she tried. But David, he lingered. And just before he turned to leave, he asked me one question. Is there anything you need? I held his eyes, steady and clear. Yes, I need you to remember that I'm still here. Not just in emergencies, not just when it's useful. Always. He nodded. A single, slow nod. Then he turned and walked to the car. As they drove away, I didn't cry. I didn't crumble. I exhaled, long and slow, like a woman who had finally said the words she needed to say. Welcome back, sweetheart. Let's finish this the way all things should end, honestly and on my own terms. After they drove away that day, something inside me settled. Not joy, not sorrow, just a kind of quiet. The kind that follows a storm when the windows stop rattling and you realize the house still stands. For weeks, there was silence. No calls, no texts, and I didn't chase them. Instead, I leaned into the life I was finally claiming. I joined a Saturday walking group, all women my age with sun hats and opinions. I took up watercolor seriously. Well, as seriously as you can when your hands shake just enough to turn every fence post into a tree. I even taught a budgeting class at the community center. How to know when you're being used, though we listed it under a more polite title. Every day I remembered myself a little more. One afternoon, I was sitting on the porch with a peach and a book when the mail came. Mixed in with the catalogs and utility bill was a card. No return address, but the handwriting. I knew it. David's. Inside was a note, 6 sentences long. I'll never forget them. Mom, you were right. We didn't ask. We didn't see you. I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix it yet, but I'd like to try. Love, David. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. I sat there in the sun, card on my lap, and let the moment bloom. Not as a triumph, not as a vindication, just a beginning. I wrote back. Brief, warm. I'm still here. Porch light's always on, but you knock first. And slowly, he did. He came alone at first, then with the kids. He brought me flowers one afternoon, not from a store, but wild ones from the side of the road. I didn't know what you liked, he said. That's all right, I told him. You'll learn. Clara never came, and I didn't ask. Some people don't want to look in the mirror, and you can't force them to see what they refuse to admit. But my grandchildren, they came back on their own, not out of obligation, out of love. They asked me questions. They sat at my kitchen table eating shortbread and learning how to fold a fitted sheet and balance a checkbook. They began to see the woman I was before someone decided I was only background noise. One evening, my granddaughter, Abby, said quietly, I'm sorry, Grandma, for how they treated you. I took her hand. Don't be sorry, darling. Just remember it. So when someone tries to treat you that way, you'll know how to stand. That, I think, is what all of this was really about. Not revenge, not retribution, just remembrance of who I was, of what I deserved, and of what I would never again let myself be talked out of. So here I am, years later, living in my little cottage with wildflowers on the windowsill and a tea kettle that sings louder than the birds outside. I didn't go back to being who I was. I became who I always should have been. And if you're reading this, love, maybe you needed to hear it too. It's never too late to turn the doorknob and walk out of the life they tried to cage you in. You don't owe anyone your silence, or your comfort, or your disappearance. You owe yourself the truth. And here's mine. They tried to put me in a place to be forgotten. Instead, I found myself.